Welcome to Channel AMAC, your insight to the Australian visa system. Good day everyone, my name's Carl Young, your online YouTube visa consultant. Are you interested about migrating to Australia? Why don't you consider to subscribe to my channel and turn on the little bell on the side so once we have all the updates and news, you'll be the first one getting all the insight. Now this video is about to explain a news came out yesterday, which is the first news came out from the Big Four, KPMG. Now KPMG does have a few say about the migration policy for Australia. Well, usually the government of Australia is open for the Big Four and large corporation their opinion on about how the economy should actually be paved and work out for the new year in the future. Now obviously there has been a lot of politicians talking about we don't want more migrants and blah blah blah, so on and so forth. And as you see how the Omicron and the virus has actually struck the nation and the world, I believe the skilled migrants in the future really lies on that topic which we are talking about right now, about the migrants. We need more migrants as a nation of Australia. I've said it so many times, despite of all, well, not all, but some politicians using that topics as a way to actually show their presentation to the public. But anyhow, the fact is rely on the numbers and who is more specialized in those numbers. Of course, it's the financial sector. So let's have a look. One of the Big Four, KPMG, how they're gonna say about the migration policy for Australia. Well, so the topic says, I really don't like how they put Google ads in between the articles. It actually looked really bad. How do you feel about it? Anyway, I've closed it anyway, but it still looked very bad. But the topic says KPMG demands 350,000 strong immigration deluge. 2022 has been begun already. Vested interest demanding massive lift in Australian migration intake. Well, obviously the first topic is here. It gets us into straight into what they're trying to say. So if you follow my channel long enough, you know enough. Every time in the past history that Australia had its economy downwards, they always use migration policy to lift the economy up again. But obviously this time the challenge is with the virus. Now how do they open up offshore migrants? Because obviously they don't want to bring the viruses in as well, but they still need those skilled people to actually work for the upcoming future of a nation like Australia. So anyway, let's have a look. The number does not lie, and I believe that KPMG do this with intent with their research and study. So this latest special pleading comes from KPMG, which has demanded overseas migration NOM be lifted in record high 350,000 people a year this decade to make up the lost immigration over COVID pandemic. And we're still in that lost period, although Australia Open has officially open, but as you see, there's still a lot of problem now today. What about the rapid testing kits? And would the government splash some cashes to more people? We'll see what happens. Especially we have actually learned that America has actually hit a record high, 1 million COVID diagnosed daily. Let's see that how that will play out for the entire 2022. So ramping up migration level to 350,000 a year to make up the collapse of overseas arrivals. Now, overseas arrivals is actually very vital, despite of it back in 2017 and 18, how a lot of politicians argue that migrants actually is contribute to the traffic congestions and all that traffic jam. But over the past 2 years, again, all these international student and migrants were gone, but the congestion and the traffic jam still exist. So the problem lies in public infrastructure, not the migrant. Again, I cannot stress that anymore. Anyway, during pandemic, the boosted economy had extra 120 billion to raise up GDP by 4.4 by the end of the decade, exclusive KPMG analysis reveal. So the business group demand, as you have seen that, and also in 2020 there has been a parliamentary committee putting forward some changes coming up in this year 2022. There's going to be a lot more changes in migration policy to actually attract more migrants in on permanent migration intake to lift 160,000 people to 200,000. KPMG chief economist Brendan Ryan argued that the nation would be better to serve adopting more aggressive, and they are politicians. They are pretty supportive on this as well, especially like the new premier of New South Wales, who coined the idea of 2 million migrants. And I believe first time when I read it, I thought that's insane. But after a few months of digesting all the information around, I think it's actually very factual, and it will actually reflect to the needs of the nation. So Dr. Ryan said that the overseas migration at 10% of size of population decade 2019, and the federal government should target similar contribution over 10 years to 2029. Not too sure how much that 10% to 2009. I think that's just right before pandemic, but obviously 2020 and 21, it's a loss. I'm not too sure whether that loss is going to be more than 10%. So if Australia want to match 10%, and that's how they argue the require of 350,000 people per year. But obviously there has been bigger Australia approach was ultimately the nation's interest. I'm pretty sure that will be the interest of the nation, because we got to look around the nations around Australia, the neighbor Asiatic countries. Okay, every country is boosting up its economy, its modernization, advanced technology, high tech and stuff like that. So many cities in Asia now has overtaken the growth had overtaken a lot of cities in Australia. So Australia, if you want to keep up as a national interest, obviously migration will be the key. I'm absolutely a supporter of increasing migration in Australia at a level above the population statement, ensure that not only we get economy benefit, but social cultural benefit, and so on and so forth, said by Dr. Ryan. So that is what's happening, and the news came out yesterday. So 2010 was the worst decade, capital GDP in 60 years, even excluding impact of 2019 20. Now, despite saying the GDP is worse, but Australia has consistently over the past 27-28 years with positive growth, and meeting all the Asians' financial crisis in 2008, what happened, the financial meltdown from America. But Australia has actually performed quite well. But it's also, sometimes the risk came when a nation has been doing so good over the past years, but they probably a little bit lack on how to reflect when a risk, an actual risk, actually coming ahead, just like how the pandemic actually hit. So as you can see in the past weeks, there's been struggles for Australia to contain Omicron, and how the population actually faces these kind of crisis. But I'm pretty sure as a nation of Australia, they could actually handle that in the coming weeks and months. So meanwhile, the Grattan Institute, Brendan's quotes repeat that boosting immigration will save the budget. Now, that is pretty easy mathematic calculations. So in the past 2 years, no one actually not believing that the budget and the tax that the government has collected is in minus. They require more, because that's happening all around the world. So a boosting of migration obviously will help. and also improve and increase the number of international education sector as well. Not saying that this sector has actually, and also tourism, they have been facing a very bad situation the past 2 years. So Treasury's model used calculate fiscal impact of migration delivery, ignore cost imposed on state budget from providing many goods and services, require sustaining bigger population, for example, infrastructure, education, social services, and these are the big ones. I tell you that whether or not they intended to deliberate not to show the figure, but it's a fact. I believe that every politician in Australia will actually know about this as well. So they says the treasury never take proper account of cost of big migration, either financial or non-financial, since these are borne primarily by state or resident at large. Anyhow, whether or not how they are, which way they argue, the migrants, the intake of migrants will actually boost the economic for sure. So the final phrases here is Australia recognizes a mass immigration program 2005 to 2020 was managed appallingly and crash-loaded everything in sight, resulting in widespread infrastructure bottleneck across Australia's major cities. Now, by saying that, so I don't think it's the mass immigration's issue, but it's more on the how they build infrastructure. Well, I've been living in Australia long enough. They have been talking about high-speed rail for 10 years. Where is it? I'm not too sure now. Where's the money? Where did money go? How about the internet, right? The cables they're looking to, actually the fiber cables. Until today, they are still building it, and people has already gone in space using satellite like SpaceX and things like that. Anyway, sadly, the show at KPMG shamelessly represent best interest and business lobby rather than the Australian people. So these are some comments coming out, although they are people opposing. This is from micro business. Although there are some people opposing the actual idea of demanding 350,000 immigrants, but again, it is, well, KPMG is not in any political view, but they are people, they are financial people, they are number sensitive. Okay, they understand how the number goes, and they understand how the number will actually stack up. And the idea of coining a more migration quota, I think it's very, very likely, despite there are some people still opposing the idea. But we start from last year, 2021, until today, we have seen more of these news articles talking about getting more migrants in. Anyway, what is your thought? Do you think it's a good idea to have more migrants in Australia or not? Why don't you leave a comment right down below? And I see you next video. Goodbye.